At 4:38 a.m., when the city still wore its lamps like tired eyelids, the back door of Maison Lucille sighed open, and a slice of cold air rode in with Naomi Reed. She had learned to move through that door the way she moved through kitchens in general quiet as steam, sure as a blade finding the seam between bone and joint. The wind off the lake hit her cheeks, but the cold felt familiar, even friendly. She tied her hair with the same old elastic she'd been faithful to for months, washed her hands until the sting of cracked knuckles returned, and stepped into the light and clang of the kitchen. Polished steel lined the walls like mirrors with nothing to say. Pans hung in measured rows. The floor had that faint sugar crackle from last night's spills. Naomi breathed in the ghosts of cardamom and garlic and lemon, a map of what had mattered here the day before, and set to work. Maison Lucille was the kind of place people bragged about getting into. White linen that never saw a wrinkle, glasses thin as dragonfly wings, wine notes printed like poetry. Out front, there was ceremony. Back here, there was the thrum of war. Chef Roland Pierce ruled the room with a metronome in his chest and a storm in his brow. He spoke in verbs mostly. Fire, slice, move. When he wanted to show affection, he called people by their stations. Guard, sauce, dish. Naomi, though, he hardly called by anything at all. Prep was what the schedule said. Prep cook, 6 days a week, first in and last to leave, and the truth was that most days she felt more like part of the building than the staff. Mop handle, rag, pair of hands. Someone had to fillet the fish that arrived cold and blinking at dawn. Someone had to square the shallots into neat glittering piles, scrape the boards, bleach the sinks, spin the greens, polish the pots until an anxious chef could see his face and make peace with it. Naomi did it, and she did it well. And most people knew she did it well because things that should have gone wrong tended not to. But knowing and saying are different verbs, and few here bothered with the second. She knew the menu like a song you can hum without meaning to. She could glance at a ticket and hear the cook times like bars in a measure. The back of her hand could tell cumin from coriander. No one asked her for a taste of anything, though. She was a useful silence. Useful silences aren't invited to speak. On good nights, when the room finally emptied and the dishwashers had winked at her and shuffled into the winter, Naomi stayed. She wiped the stations again for herself, shut the radio off, and listened to the hum of the walk-in. The leftovers told stories, ends of fish, orphaned herbs, cream with a few hours of life left. She claimed nothing meant for the next day. She was religious about that. But she had a faith that said there was holiness in what was about to be thrown away, and she practiced her small liturgy with a saucepan and a spoon. She cooked the way some people pray, quietly, with her whole memory. The first prayers she had ever learned came from women whose hands never stopped moving, her grandmother, who taught her to coax flavor from scraps, her mother, who taught her that food could be a kind of apology for the world. She wrote those prayers into food, and then she hid them. Stainless containers, tape across the lid, NR in careful block letters, back of the walk-in, deep back, behind the milk crates. It was a Tuesday when the note went up on the staff board. VIP lunch tomorrow. Chef's handwriting. No flourishes, no smiles. The manager floated through the kitchen like a kite someone was struggling to reel back. Perfect, he kept saying, like the word itself could sand down the edges of reality. Roland's voice wore a serrated edge all morning. Naomi moved faster. Not because he always yelled, but because a certain kind of day asked you to make yourself smaller, flatter, less likely to be seen as the reason something went wrong. That night, after the last guest had dragged a chair and thanked a server and left his breath on the window as a small cloud, Naomi stayed again. There were salmon fillets that wouldn't see another day, a bunch of parsley tired at the tips, a lemon with more life than anyone would guess from the wrinkle of its skin, mushrooms that still remembered a forest. She worked like a watchmaker, not hurried but precise, her mind full of the faces whose kitchens had raised her. Grandma Etta's tin of cornmeal, her mother's single good pan that survived 3 apartments and 1 flood, the neighbor who had slipped her a Meyer lemon once like a talisman. Naomi crusted the fish with herbs and crumbs, kissed it with heat, let it rest as if it had earned rest. She whisked cream into the whisper of lemon until it was a promise on the tongue. Mushrooms met butter and garlic and a dash of sherry and woke up. Potatoes, humble as rain, became a bed with lemon scent hidden in the mash instead of shouted on top. She tasted with the unreasonable hope of the faithful and knew she had made something that told the truth. She plated it for no one. The dish was a letter she didn't know how to mail. She slid it into a container, marked it NR, leftovers, and set it deep in the fridge like you push a secret under the floorboard of your chest. Then she cleaned until the kitchen gleamed the way it does when the only eyes on it are your own. And she went home to the south side and slept the kind of sleep that comes after you've done the right thing for no reason anyone else can see. Morning comes where it always does, at the back door, in the stainless basins, in the clipped orders, in the burn on your forearm from an oven rack you thought you could beat. Tickets began to spool, a server with nerves for eyelashes smudged through and out again. Roland stood with his arms crossed at the pass, a general who had convinced himself that the war would still go his way if his glare could get there first. There are a dozen ways a mistake can happen, and almost none of them are interesting until one of them changes a life. Kenji, a line cook who ran on 2 hours of sleep and 3 kinds of ambition, sprinted into the walk-in, grabbed the nearest lidded container from the bottom shelf, and ran it back to the flat top. He reheated what he believed he recognized, the kind of thing chef liked to hold in reserve for special guests and quick fixes, and plated it with the muscle memory Maison Lucille had built into his wrists. Table 7. Window seat. Midday light. The man there wore an ordinary jacket and a watch with a face as spare as a white plate. He took 1 bite and stopped, the way a person stops when a sound from the past has found them in a crowd. A small smile creased his mouth. "Could you ask to see the chef?" he told the server, quiet, as if he were asking for the salt. Servers gossip in currents. Their news reached the kitchen ahead of their feet. "Table 7 loved the salmon," one reported, and Roland grunted without looking up. Moments later, the words changed tempo. "He asked to see the chef. Said it's the best dish he's had this year." Roland's eyes flicked to the rail. He didn't recognize the plate because the plate wasn't his. "Who fired that?" he snapped. Kenji lifted a hand, then faltered. "Grabbed a container from the walk-in, chef." "Thought it was yours." Roland stalked to the fridge, wrenched it open, and found the evidence as if it had been waiting to testify. Metal pan, tape crossed like a small regret. NR in block letters. He held it like it was a weapon and found Naomi with his eyes. "You used my product to play," he said. Not loud. Worse, soft and sharp. "Yes, chef," Naomi answered. "Leftovers. I cleaned after. I didn't label it for service." The metal clanged into the sink. "You don't cook here," he said, the words meant to be bars on a cage. You prep. You clean. You do not make dishes that end up in my dining room. He wants to see a chef? I'll go. He went. He squared his jacket and swallowed his doubt. At table 7, he performed the ritual name, title, practiced smile. The guest looked up and offered a calm that somehow made the room quieter. That dish isn't on your menu, the man said. Who created it? Roland's pause was less than a heartbeat, but a person who lived on food could taste it. I did, he said. Sometimes I experiment. The lemon lives under the mash, the man observed, not a question. And that's Meyer, not Eureka. A note flicked open on his phone. I'd like to meet the person who plated it. We're a team, Roland said, grin getting tighter around the edges. But the idea is mine. The guest's eyes softened without getting kinder. If I don't speak to the real creator, I'll go. And I won't return. There is a particular cold that forms behind a chef's ribs when he realizes he has lied to the wrong mouth. Back in the kitchen, Roland moved through the stations like a storm that couldn't quite remember what it meant to be thunder. He tried authority on again. No one says a word. No one goes out there. Understood? Heads bobbed, but a silence had loosened inside the room, and everybody could hear it shifting. Naomi washed her hands again, because some decisions are cleaner that way. She untied her apron halfway, wiped her palms on a towel, and walked toward the door that separated the roar from the hush. People parted without meaning to. The door swung, the music changed, and Naomi stepped into the world where plates have first names. The guest watched her arrive with the look of someone who had already done the math. Good afternoon, she said. I'm Naomi Reed. It was you, he answered, a confirmation more than a question. What inspired the dish? My grandmother, Naomi said. Cornmeal crust when that was what we had. My mother's way of hiding lemon under the potatoes because she said the best parts of a thing don't need to be loud. He listened like a person who believed that flavor was a language. Where did you train? In kitchens that don't give out certificates, she said. I've been here 3 years. I prep. He stood, not tall but very present, and set a card on the table between them the way you might set down a key. My name is Martin Hale, he said. Consultant. Former inspector. The small star in the corner of the card looked like punctuation. When you open your own place, call me. I'd like to watch what you do next. Back at the pass, Roland saw the exchange and felt something come loose inside the structure he had built from certainty. He walked in as Naomi walked out, their shoulders almost touching. His words searched for an audience and found none. You think one plate gives you a career? He said in the kitchen, not quite to her and not quite to himself. Naomi slid the card into her pocket like a person who had finally found a place to put a small, important truth. After lunch, the air changed. It didn't become softer. It simply stopped belonging to one man. The manager whispered to Roland, and the color drained out of his jaw. Somebody somewhere had made a call. Names move through this industry the way the smell of bacon moves through a house. You can close doors, but the truth finds the vents. By the end of the week, Roland's certainty had developed a crack. By the end of the month, it had become a fault line. 2 months later, the corner that used to house a laundromat on the south side had a new sign hand-carved by a neighbor with good hands. Quiet fire. The old brick remained, scrubbed and proud. Jars of pickles shared a shelf with cookbooks so worn the titles read like rumors. Herbs looked out at the street from small windows that had watched a lot of seasons come and go. Inside there were 5 tables, a counter, and a kitchen that didn't pretend it was separate from the dining room, because nothing about the place wanted to be separate from anything. Naomi cooked with the same economy of motion Maison Lucille had taught her, but now the verbs were hers. Her oldest friend, Darla King, ran the register and the dishes, her laugh loud enough to recalibrate a day. On the first night, 2 tables filled. On the second, 3. By the end of the month, people waited with their shoulders tucked into their coats and hope warming their hands. Quiet Fire didn't have a menu that stood still. Naomi wrote it fresh each Tuesday in chalk that smudged if you leaned too close, and she liked that. Some dishes appeared the way kindness appears, unannounced, necessary, memorable. Some returned like old songs, improved by time and practice. She cooked what was at the market, what the neighborhood brought her, what a memory asked her to try again with the better knife she finally owned. One gray evening, the color of dishwater and pearl, a woman with hair gone silver and a scarf full of good stories sat alone at a corner table. She ate with manners that said she had known hunger and had no desire to be rude to the food that had found her. When she finished, she waited until the plate had been cleared and asked, in a voice soft as a prayer, "May I meet the cook?" Naomi wiped her hands and came out with a towel over her shoulder because some habits are good ones. The woman took Naomi's fingers like they were something to be read. "This tastes like a sundae I haven't seen in 50 years, she said. "My mother called it stew because we didn't have a better name and never had enough meat to make soup blush. You gave me back a room in my house I thought was locked." Naomi felt the kind of gratitude that doesn't know what to do with itself. "Thank you," she said. The woman smiled in the quiet, particular way people smile when something has been returned to them that they didn't think could be returned. That night after close, Naomi took the day's receipts into her hands, the stack thin but honest. A new email waited on the old laptop at the counter, an invitation to speak at a gathering for rising black chefs. She read it twice, 3 times, then laughed once, not because she didn't believe it, but because belief sometimes arrives dressed as surprise. Fear knocked and found no vacancy. She clicked yes. Across town, in a borrowed apartment, with good light but bad dreams, Roland Pierce watched a clip on his phone from a local food segment about a new place on the south side making food that remembers. He paused when the camera found Naomi's face. He had sent out resumes. He had promised himself he would be more careful with the truth. Kitchens, though, are small towns that stretch across the world. People talk. Offers did not materialize. A chef is a set of hands and a name. When the name sours, the hands have to work twice as hard for half as much. Quiet Fire learned the rhythms of being known. Friday nights, the line drifted past the barbershop. Sunday afternoons, the church crowd brought blessings and opinions in equal measure. Naomi knew which couples would order 2 spoons for 1 dessert, and which kids would ask for extra bread, as if bread might teach them patience. She added a second burner, then a third. Darla started writing names down the right way, on little cards with times and guesses about what they might want. And then, as happens if you cook the truth long enough, the city leaned in. Letters arrived. Small ones. Thoughtful ink. Blog posts written at 2 a.m. by people who could not sleep because they had eaten a dish that kept talking to them. A trusted critic came and left without saying a word, and wrote later that Quiet Fire served the kind of food that made you remember who you loved when you were a better person. One night, a man in a dark suit with a notebook that looked well-traveled took table 2. He ate quietly, made a second note, ordered a second plate, and asked to meet the cook. There were no theatrics, which is itself a kind of theater. Naomi walked out, towel over her shoulder, and met eyes that kept promises. "I've heard your name more than once," he said. "You're not chasing the spotlight." "I'm chasing the truth," Naomi answered. He nodded and gave her nothing that would spoil the day by becoming a hope too heavy to carry. Naomi appreciated that. She had learned to cradle possibility like a hot pan, with care and with an understanding that you set it down when you need both hands free. She went back to the stove. A line had formed. A girl no taller than the counter stood on tiptoe to watch her plate of fish. Naomi looked down and smiled. "You cook?" she asked. "Sometimes," the girl said. "Good," Naomi said. "The world needs all the sometimes that turn into always." The invitation to speak took her to a stage she never imagined, where lights were warm and the faces in the dark were full of want, the good kind. She talked about her grandmother's hands, about the little pan, about lemon hiding under potatoes, about labels on stainless containers and the back of a walk-in. She did not talk about Roland by name. She did not need to. The story was not his, not even the part where he tried to keep it. The story was a girl who decided that the quiet in her was not a vacancy, but a kiln. Months have a way of acting like weeks when you are busy building a thing that loves you back. Quiet Fire added a sixth table, then went back to 5 because someone wise told Naomi that success can be the enemy of the room you made for soul. A neighborhood kid painted an outside wall with a mural of flames that looked like flowers. Naomi cooked and cooked and cooked, and the cooking made a path through the world that had her name on it in a handwriting she recognized as her own. She saw sometimes men who wore their certainty like armor and recognized in them a version of a chef she once worked for. She also saw her own face reflected in the brass of the ladles, the face of a woman who had been kept small and had not stayed that way, whose hands had learned to say what her mouth had not been asked to speak. It rained the night Martin Hale came back. He did not announce himself or tug at the sleeve of importance. He took a seat near the window, wrote a note now and then, ate slowly, ordered what Naomi sent without asking, finished, and stood at the counter to pay like everyone else. "You opened," he said, and Naomi nodded like a person for whom the present tense was a victory. "I opened." "Keep the card," he smiled. "You won't need to use it much longer." She understood what he meant, and did not reach for the future with both hands, because there were plates on the pass that needed to be carried with care. She thanked him. She went back to the stove. The city moved through the door and sat down in front of her, and she fed it. After close, Naomi sat by the window with a cup of tea that remembered mint. The street quieted into that special hour when even sirens sound like part of the night, and not an argument with it. She looked at the chalkboard where tomorrow's menu would go and raised the stub to write. At the top, she made a small star no judge assigned it. No guidebook asked for permission. It was for the girl who had hidden her best under the mash, because she had been told the best should be quiet. It was for the woman who understood that quiet can feed a fire instead of smothering it. She thought of the back door at 4:38 a.m., of the cold that greeted her like a truth-teller, of the kitchen where she had been a useful silence. She thought of the day a man at table 7 had recognized a flavor and followed it like a thread through a maze and found her at the other end. She thought of the neighborhood now, of Darla humming along to a radio that never learned the names of the songs, but always knew the tune. She thought of the girl on tiptoe who wanted to cook sometimes. Never underestimate the quiet ones, Naomi said into the glass, and her breath drew a small fog on the window, a cloud she could write in with a finger if she wanted to. That's where the fire starts. Then she stood, turned off the lights that did not need to burn, and went home to sleep again, the sleep of someone who has done the right thing for reasons no one can take away. In the morning, when the city would be all eyelids and steam again, she would be here. She would wash her hands until the sting spoke her name, light the burners one by one like candles in a chapel, and begin again. Because that is how a life gets made. Not in the moment a card changes a day, not in the thought of a star at the top of a board, but in the practice of telling the truth over heat until it tastes like it belongs to you. Some fires begin in sampan, in silence. Camila, the kitchen helper, treated like a shadow, cooked a dish from ingredients headed for the trash. Not to show off, but out of love for honest flavor. When the guest at table 7 tasted the soul in it and asked to meet the chef, Camilla stepped forward and told the truth, even if it meant losing her job. The reward wasn't applause. It was a simple business card that opened a door. Soon she had a small place of her own, where every plate carried the cook's real name. What's the life value here? Do the right thing when no one is watching. Tend the leftovers of your days and turn them into something memorable. Dare to walk out of the invisible cage other people put you in. When the world won't give you a seat, build a table, invite others with your authenticity. Quiet, steady, and true. You don't need praise. Let the work speak for your heart. Have you ever been underestimated or done a quiet good deed no one noticed? Tell us your story in the comments so we can remind each other that goodness is still here, in the kitchen, on the table, and in the way we live every day. And don't forget to subscribe. Each week. We share warm, human stories that keep the fire in you burning bright.